I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm actually an Oregon native, so coming back to Portland makes me really happy. I'm from Ashland, yes. So I really, really love coming back to Oregon. I'm currently in the Bay Area working at Airbnb, and yes, we got into a little bit of my background working at Google, and previously I also worked at IDEO, the innovation design firm, working on a lot of financial products. So there's a lot going on in the Bay Area, but we really, really love going out to other communities and getting to know what's going on in Portland. I was just in Philadelphia. We were out in Brooklyn. So it's really great for us to come to these spaces and really get to know who's doing what in the design community. Thank you so much for that introduction. As it already mentioned, I help run the team that specifically focuses on host experiences. The organization is divided into a bunch of different facets. We have our guest experiences, and then we have our host experiences. It's a really good reason why we divide it up that way. Our hosts are very, very unique. They need very specific things, different than our guests. Our hosts tend to be almost like micro entrepreneurs. They're small business owners, essentially, where our guests, they're aspirational. They're out there to travel, to see the world. They're looking for, that sort of self-growth and personal growth that I'll talk about in a minute. So what I really want to do in this talk is really explain specifically what does it mean to be a host, and really how we provide great tools to make hosting easier. Now, what I'm going to talk about is completely hot off the presses, as in like this morning. So forgive me as I really walk through some new material, but I thought let's do this. I'm going to talk to you about what we actually are releasing today and in the next couple of months. So it's brand new for us. And it's really a journey that I think we learned from. I'm going to share some of the things that we could have done better and the things that we thought was really successful. So to start out, I just want to declare this, hosting is not an easy activity. I don't know if any one of you is a host, but it's not. I see a few hands. Yes. It's not an easy job. A lot of people as guests assume that, you just show up in their home and then you leave. There's a lot of work that actually needs to be done to provide a great experience for guests. So today I want to talk to you about how my team has been really talking to hosts and what we do to provide what we think is a delightful experience and what we mean by delight, which is a sense of belonging. So most people are familiar with this, but for those who are not, this is Maslow's hierarchy. For us, for some, delight has been used as a word to indicate sprinkles on top, like the extra frill. We think of examples, Zappos and the confetti. We think of Faya whales. We think of these little design touches that just gives it a little candy. At Airbnb, we actually think of delight in a different way. We specifically think delight is embedded in this sense of belonging. And let me walk you through why this is important, why Maslow's hierarchy is really important for us. So really there's a series of needs, of human needs that people have. At the very bottom, you have your physical needs, your shelter, your water, your food, your hygiene, all the things that you need to just fundamentally be happy. You can't really climb up the ladder of the hierarchy until you have those basic needs. And then you have safety. You need to know that you're safe physically and emotionally in your community, that you won't be harmed. And then after that, you have this sense of love and belonging. And this is Airbnb's sweet spot. This is where we're starting. So we're assuming the two are happening, the two bottom layers are happening, and now Airbnb is doubling down on this third layer. That third layer, without that, you can't achieve the next things. And that's why our internal mantra and our motto is belong anywhere. That's what we're really after, is really fulfilling a fundamental human need. So now that you have these things in place, you really you can layer on top of that. But what we also need to do is understand, what does this mean from the perspective of our hosts and our guests? What does it actually mean to belong as a host? And that's what my team is really focused on. So, definition of belonging. By definition, belonging means to be accepted and to feel like a natural member. At Airbnb, our mission statement, belong anywhere, this is to mean like it's no matter who you are, what language you speak, your cultural background, the previous countries you visited, you should be able to go anywhere and feel what it's like to actually be from that country and taste it for a day. So it's really about kind of immersing yourself in the community around you. Now, let's talk about how this works. A lot of you use Airbnb, so I'm going to talk to you about how we think about it in the company, and hopefully this resonates with you. To start out, we created a platform. So it's really, if you think about it, Airbnb is like a matchmaking service. It could even be equated to a dating service. Guests find hosts, hosts find guests. That's what we're doing. But that's not what we're selling. 90% of what Airbnb is selling is actually an offline experience. It's the stay, it's the accommodations, it's the realization of travel, and that's what's actually being sold. So what drives Airbnb is our mission, and that mission is to provide that collective sense of belonging offline, but we are enabling that through our online platform. And we work very, very closely with our hosts in order to make that happen. So to make that happen, we engage the host community. That's our lifeblood. That's our connection to the outside world. Our hosts are motivated by a sense of local community. So some people start out because of financial needs. Quite honestly, I think like almost all our hosts start thinking, oh, I can actually make some money doing this. But they quickly discover another benefit, which is the connection they have to the community and to other guests. In fact, I talk to hosts all the time, and they say like, one of the things that makes them so happy about being a host is having people come to them. It's almost like the world comes to them, and they get to meet all these people that they would never have met before if they hadn't opened their doors up for hosting. So in short, like hosting, they sort of feel this motivation in two levels. One is they actually meet people, and we do have a lot of baby boomers, a lot of people who are like, I'm staying here, I can't afford to travel, and that feels like the world comes to them. And two, they get to share what they love about their community, and this is really, really important. A lot of times our hosts are kind of like institutional knowledge based for their neighborhoods. They know everything about it. They lived there for years and years and years, and they want to share that. And I've heard hosts actually say to me, like, I don't see the grass is greener, I see green shoots where I live. And I think that's a really important way to see the world as a host. So then our hosts help out our guests. And our guests are motivated by the idea of personal growth. Most of us are travelers, so we know what this means. Travelers are essentially purchasing the idea of belonging. That's what our brand is, and that's what we're selling to them. They're looking to climb up that Maslow's hierarchy through travel. So they like getting the sense of belonging and climbing up that scale. Travel actually pushes people out of their comfort zone. They're getting to know different kinds of cultures and different kinds of ways of doing things. Remember, on that hierarchy, the next thing that's there is the sense of esteem. So a lot of people, travel is something that they're proud of. In fact, when you look at dating profiles, most people say I'm well-traveled, or they include travel on their dating profile because they're actually proud of it. That's the sense of esteem that they're going for. And even self-actualization, the very, very top, that's also why people travel. That's another thing that we're setting people up for achieving. And the reason why we think that people are going there is that, for example, if you ask people, what is the thing that you would do if money was not a question? Like, what would you do with your life? The number one thing people say is travel. And there's a reason for that, because they assume they've got their personal needs, safety, housing, they've got everything. So what's the sugar on top? And that's travel for them. So now that we understand how the platform works and what motivates everyone, let's talk about specifically delight. And I know we're talking about deconstructing delight, so I want to really share how we've been doing that over the last couple of months at Airbnb. So delight to our guests comes from this form of personalization. The travel industry has really created a sense of commodity. There's no other way to say it. You go to a city, you see the same landmarks, you take the same selfies in front of the same statues, you have the food that everyone tells you got to go this place, and you see the lines outside the door where everyone's going in order to experience that city. What Airbnb is trying to do is look beyond the common and help travelers discover real kind of micro moments about that city, something super authentic. We want people to make breakfast at their own house, like with ingredients that they bought, discover new neighborhoods that they wouldn't have normally gone to. Like in San Francisco, a lot of people have been to Union Square. Not a lot of people have been to, like, say, the Sunset, if you know the Bay Area. We want also people to interact with locals. It's often that if you're, especially a single traveler, just traveling to a city, it's, unless if you're like a real extrovert and really reaching out, it's real easy to just kind of not talk to a single person. You can travel completely alone the entire time. And what we're trying to do at Airbnb is get people together and get you to actually have interactions with locals in order to experience what it's like to live there. So delight to our guests feels like a trip that was actually theirs and not manufactured by others. Next, for our hosts, delight comes in the form of truly providing hospitality. They are motivated by great trips for someone else. They want them to have a great trip. They want to provide that for someone. We have hosts who make breakfast, give tours, leave special notes. I've traveled on Airbnb on my anniversary, and the host leaves like a sweet note and a bottle of wine. These are the little touches that you would never expect from a hotel, and if it did, your mind would be blown. But our hosts do this every single day, and it's not just expected. It's because they actually care. And it's not, it's not turned into a standardization. It's because they actually want to make that personal connection with their guests. So there are hosts who really, really love where they live, and they want to share this with the world, and they do that through little touches of personalization to connect with someone. For Airbnb, we really recognize that in order for all this offline activity to exist, we need a stellar platform. That's the basis for all this activity to happen. So it's the foundation for everything. So over the last several months, my team focused significant time and resources on looking at our tools. And for those of you hosts in the room, like our tools are actually not very easy, and especially on mobile, we have a lot of work to do, and we know this. We've been hearing it over and over and over again. So what we did is we really talked to our hosts to really understand what makes hosts hard and what we could do to make it easier. There's kind of an obvious here. The most commonly requested fix is our mobile app. And I'll explain why. Why the mobile app? The reason is pretty obvious. Hosting requires significant communication. We heard over and over that our mobile app just doesn't work well for communicating, so we took a step back and we really created a new tool together. So my team began by creating a series of prototypes. As conversation starters, we talked to hosts and we really kind of had this dialogue about what hosts do on a daily basis. We continued to meet with them. With hosts all around the world. Every conversation tended to trigger new insights, helped us build more features, and really understand what we're missing. Throughout this design process, our hosts co-designed the experience with us, so it covered all of their day-to-day needs. It wasn't us telling them, here's the platform, it was them telling us, this is what I need. In the end, we created literally dozens of prototypes. We met with over 100 hosts over the last couple months. This is deep dive conversations with people, not just like 5-minute conversations, but hours. 40% of them outside the US. And that's a really, really important distinction. We in the Silicon Valley are kind of in our little bubble, and it's really important that we leave the bubble in order to design for other people. I joke sometimes that Airbnb is actually a European company. I say this because 86% of our hosts are actually not in the United States. So we have to leave the valley. We have to go outward and see the tools that people are using. Why am I showing this image? So this is sort of the foundation of representing the foundation of why we prototype. And we talk about prototyping a lot. But so this man, this is David Chesterfield. He designed and created the Lincoln Memorial. In his workshop in Massachusetts, he has, or had at one point, 75 different versions of the Lincoln Memorial carved out, from little baby ones to huge ones that were about 3/4 the size of the Lincoln Memorial. And with each one, there was a little bit of a shift. Like his gaze would look a little bit further down, his fingers would be a little bit more curled, one foot would be a little bit more forward, and the folds of his pants would shift. And it's important to know, as you start to grow something and make it larger and larger and larger, it changes the way that someone will respond to it. And we look at the, mobile in particular in that way. You have a basis of what you think the platform should be, and then you have what the developers want to add, what project managers want to add, and you have to constantly prototype to know that it's still working, that it's still meeting the needs of our users. And so that's why we prototype. So with every conversation, we triggered new insights that helped us with the features that we needed. We also discovered that mobile does not mean the same thing for everyone in the world. So in Silicon Valley, we talk about, oh, this works really well on my iPhone with great Wi-Fi, and that's nice, but once you leave the United States, that's not the case, and most of you already know this. So for example, like in Japan, this was 3 weeks ago, we went to Japan, and we were pretty surprised how many people had candy bar phones and flip phones, and then they would carry a tablet with them. This was like so confusing to us. We had no idea that this was going to be the case. We always thought of Japan as being like forward in technology, and then we see all these flip phones, we're like, how the heck are we going to do anything mobile for these hosts? And we have some really detailed conversations with them about this and the tools that they're using. So all of our assumptions, they're not true, and we have to go outside to know that that's the case. So even though we are releasing a new iPhone and Android app, we have a lot of work to do when we look at other platforms and what does mobile actually mean in the global community. We also learned a lot when we went to other Asian countries. We toured all of Asia, talking to hosts in depth. Not only, one thing to really consider is not only is it really hard to download an app, I don't know if any of you have experienced this while traveling in China or Korea, download times are really, really small once you get around all of the logistics of it. But there's some cultural significance about why you carry a specific device versus another, which we were really surprised about. So, for example, a group of hosts, we brought a bunch, I think it was about 10 hosts, we brought them to a room to have like a sort of a focus group style conversation, an open dialogue about the tools that they're using, and they're all carrying iPhone 6 Plus. We're like, what? We'd never considered these huge phones, these huge phablets for hosting. And then we took a step back, we're like, yeah, this makes total sense. One, it's their primary device. They don't have a desktop, so they're just using their phone. And if you imagine living your life, you put away your laptop and you try to do all your work on your phone. If you've ever attempted that, it's really, really tough. And assuming you do more than just email, it's actually not very easy. So having a bigger screen with more real estate makes total sense. Then there is two, and this was really, really interesting for us. There was a sense of actual physical beauty pointed out with having a big phone. And I just mind was blown by this. Having a big giant phone against your face made your face look smaller, which was more aesthetically pleasing for them. I had no idea this was the case. This is a culture I had no insights into prior to this, and I thought that was just so fascinating. As that market, as the middle class is really growing, and they have these material objects that represent their own wealth, this is how they show it, through these little things that they can carry around with them and show. So they might not have a huge house, but they have like a $1,000 phone that they can show everyone, and that's really important for them. So these were the sort of things that we took home with us that really showed us that when you leave the valley, you kind of learn a little bit more about what it really means to be mobile. So we got into actually designing. Using this process, my team was able to make some significant improvements in streamlining our host interactions with the mobile app. We started with some really small changes. There are some obvious UX problems that we solved. Just gonna be honest here, we know that there are some problems that we need to fix. One was the inbox, where people manage communication. Again, the whole reason why we looked at going for a major mobile revamp is because the communication is the number one thing that the hosts need to do well. So when we were looking at the data, and we do a lot of data science at Airbnb, when we were looking at the data, we're like, okay, what's the number one tap on our current app right now? And for some weird reason, we didn't know why, but it was this this right here. And that is like this, where you access the side menu. It's where everything else is. It's the junk drawer. We're like, why are people all tapping there? That's so weird. And then we looked at the second most common place where people were tapping, and that was messages. That was in there. And then they would go through their messages. So this is pretty obvious. We should put the inbox first instead of making people seek it 4 clicks in. And it is 4 clicks because you have to download it. It shows you the guest side. Then you have to switch over to the host side. Then you have to click the side. And it's craziness. So we solved that problem. And then, yes, I'm so happy our hosts are happy because honestly, it should have been fixed a long time ago, and we knew that. But and this is a lesson about data. If you only look at the data and you don't actually talk to users and you don't connect the dots, you can miss the big story and the big picture. So that was a lesson learned for us. So after we fixed the low-hanging fruit, we got into more complicated aspects of hosting, like time management and task management. Hosting is a lot like operating a small business, as I mentioned. It's like micro-entrepreneurship. Our hosts must be their own marketing, customer service, operations, sales, sometimes even housekeeping, all in one. It's a lot of jobs that you have to do. So having a calendar to manage all of this activity is super vital, which is why we prototyped and designed over 40 different designs. And we learned a lot in that process. One calendar does not rule them all. You can't have one solution for everyone. And there's a reason why when you go to, say, like the Apple Marketplace and look for a calendar, there's like 20 different apps at least for calendar management. It's because for everyone, they manage their time differently. So what we did is created a couple different views in calendars that had specific purpose. One manages your available time, like, hey, can I go out tomorrow night or not? Or am I meeting a guest that needs to check in? Another one manages pricing, like, hey, for some reason no one's booking this night. Maybe I should drop my price. Another one just manages your day. Like you wake up in the morning, you look at the app and you're like, all right, I have something at 3 o'clock, then I have some free time, and then I need to meet with a cleaner at 7 o'clock and make sure everything's great. So there's different levels and different aspects of time management. Instead of crunching it all into one solution, which tends, it could have been that that would have been a tendency. We decided to really focus on the use cases and create different views that match those use cases. And we did this over and over and over again, and we still are. In fact, my team is out prototyping and designing with our hosts right now. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot. And it was really, really important for us to connect to real users. So the way that we think about prototypes, and I think this is an important distinction from other companies I've worked at, previously prototypes at other companies for me was about validation. Design does their thing. Maybe they create a prototype. Maybe the engineer creates a prototype. We go to user research and say, hey, can you make sure this is great? They go to user research. They said, this is what the user said. I validated it. And either it gets the green light or you have some changes to make, and then you kind of iterate like that. What we really think about with prototyping is this idea of conversation starter. Instead of validation, it's co-designing. You're co-designing with your audience. They are responding to something with physicality. They are responding to something that feels real, and so they can have a closer connection to it and tell you, this is what I actually need. When you remove that sense of realness, you kind of get a removed sense of feedback too. You get that distance in the feedback. And so the more real you have it, the closer the conversation can be. And it really is, for us, about co-designing and the conversation. So one learning that I want to say also about prototyping is we did a ton. I told you, for the calendar, we went through 40 different revs. To be honest, I don't think we needed to do that much. We kind of maybe over-calibrated for constantly going out over and over and over, and we probably could have made the process faster, because now we're the pendulum is almost swinging too far, where everyone's like, oh, I have this little idea, let's go prototype it and ask what users think. There is a place for product intuition. We knew the inbox should be fixed. We didn't need to go out, prototype it, and go out and have people tell us this. We could have done that faster. So that's something that my team is really learning, is the difference between asking users what they need and really almost depending on them to tell us that they need it. Product intuition definitely plays a role. And I'd say product intuition can bring you to about 70 to 80% of what the product should be, bringing out to the users with real prototypes will get you that extra 20 to 30% in that moment of delight that you're looking for. So that being said, knowing that we probably didn't need to prototype as much to really ask our users what they want, they did give us a lot of great new feature ideas. And I love the sense this is kind of an IDEO thing, looking for workarounds. When you look for workarounds, you basically see they're using the product this way, but there's some weird things they're doing over here to make their day work. And those weird things is actually your sweet spot. Those are the things that you should build into your product. So one of the things that we witnessed from a lot of hosts, especially those who are using the desktop, is they had a Word document on their desktop with all the responses they repeat, copy and paste over and over and over again to their guests. And it's always like the Wi-Fi password, where to park, where's the best restaurant, how to get in. It's the same thing. They literally copy and paste every time, change the name, and say, have a great stay. This is just how they're efficient. It's how they can respond quickly. So this was a great workaround. Works on desktop, doesn't work on mobile. You could, but it's not as easy on mobile for sure. So we embedded it into the app. Now what we have is this idea of templates, where from a single tap, you can access these pre-saved templates. It populates into the field. You can make your custom edits, send away, and you responded within seconds instead of having to wait until you get home and do it on your desktop. But that's so far, everything I've talked to you about is about user experience. I also want to make it really clear that there's a huge technical component to this. To have a trusted tool, especially mobile, that people will rely on, you have to have something stable. There's this idea, this perceived idea of stable, and then there's the actual technical aspect of stable. So technical is like it can't crash. It actually needs to send the data. But then there's the perceived, which is feedback. So when the user sends a message, they need to know it was actually sent. They can't question, did it go through? Did it not go through? We've all been in those kind of moments, especially, you're in spotty Wi-Fi and you're like, I don't know if that actually happened. On the design side, we're really, really focused on the feedback of actions and making sure it was really clear that something was executed. On the engineering side, they really worked on the pipes. Making sure it was super, super stable and exceeded most standards for messaging, and making sure that guests could really trust the tool, especially if it was their only device, which is really important. So in the end, our team really felt like we co-designed with our hosts on this app, and that this is just the first step. There's really going to be a ton of iterations, and our team definitely shifted from a once-and-done culture. I've seen this many times when team gets together, they finally get approval from some sort of VP to do a project, and they build it, they throw it out there, and they all walk away from it. And maybe they'll come back to it later. Our team has completely shifted the way that we think about prototyping and building products. To us, it's now a continuum. It's this ongoing conversation that with our hosts, and we have a true belief that what hosting is today is not going to be what hosting is tomorrow or a year from now. It's a moving target. It's a new thing. People are starting to adopt it. So we have to constantly go out there and constantly talk to people as it's mutating, as it's growing popularity, and it's becoming more mainstream. Hosting, in general, right now, I say in Portland, it's considered a pretty common activity, but if you go to other cities, it's kind of weird for some people. Are like, you're letting strangers into your home. That's interesting. So as more of these communities really look at it as something that's normal, we know that our app has to adapt to those communities. So it turns out that we need to we've learned that we need to keep listening and that we need to keep responding to our hosts. And know exactly what they need a year from now and 5 years now, and we build our roadmaps accordingly. And lastly, I want to mention that to be heard, and this is sort of what I'm expressing to my team over and over again, is the thing that we want to embody culturally is, for a host to be heard and to be asked, what do you think, is really the best form of belonging that designers and Airbnb can provide. That's the best thing any product designer can provide for their users. This means listening without judgment, tossing out feedback because it doesn't fit the parameters. I've definitely been in research studies in the past where the study would say, you know what, they didn't really get it, or they weren't really that savvy, so don't worry about that. They build their own parameters, and it's really important when you're listening that you're not presetting the parameters, but you're letting the users set the parameters, because that's really the definition of the product. So after we take an initial stab at building something, it's really important to not only use your intuition, but really listen and really hand off the reins to the users. Let them be the experts and let them tell you what they actually need. So thank you.